Hey everybody, it's Lisa with Quilting in the Valley. We want to talk a little bit about one of the three things that makes your quilts come out correctly. So there's only three things that are going to make your quilt come out right. Cutting correctly, piecing correctly, and pressing correctly. You do those three things right, and your quilt pieces, your blocks are all going to come out the right size, which means your quilt's going to all go together well. So we're going to talk about piecing today, your 1/4 inch seam. So there's a lot of back and forth. Do we use a scant quarter? Do you use a full quarter? How do you know? You don't. You do what's right for you in the situation that you're in any given time. So if you're using, say you're me, I always use a Microtex needle and a 50 weight Orfil when I piece. So that means I'm using an acutely sharp needle, which makes smaller holes and doesn't pull my fabric down into my feed dogs. I'm using Orfil thread, which is a 50 weight 2-ply thread, which is one of the finer threads that you can get. It'll lay flatter in my seams. So I'm not taking up space in my seam when I press with the extra thread. I'm not pulling my fabric down into my feed dogs, these down here, with my needle. So now when that feed dog's down in here. So when I press my seam open, I'm not going to lose space because of this. If I did a scant quarter and I didn't use up space in my seam allowance, then my piece is going to be too big. How do I know? Because I'm going to take two 2-inch pieces of fabric. I'm going to sew them together. I'm going to press them well, and then I'm going to measure them. And if they're not 3.5 inches, then I need to do something different. That's how you know. If you're using, say, a 40 weight thread, which would be quite a bit thicker than this, 10% thicker than this. If you're using a 40 weight thread and you're using, say, a universal needle, which is a blunt tip needle and it pulls your fabric a little bit more, then your seam allowance is probably going to need to be closer to a scant seam allowance. You're going to have to come a couple threads in to make up for your fabric pressing over that thicker thread. Check it. Check it. Do your 2-inch pieces, sew them together, press them well, and measure them. If they're less than 3.5 inches, you need a bigger seam allowance. If they're more than 3.5 inches, other way around. If it's less than 3.5 inches, you need a smaller seam allowance. If it's more than 3.5 inches, I am so backwards today. If it's less than 3.5 inches, you need a smaller seam allowance. If it's more than 3.5 inches, you need a bigger seam allowance. Jeez Louise. Anyway, this is like the 4th time we've tried to do this. Just don't go there. So, anyway, use your Microtex needle. It makes a difference. And do your test seam. Press it, figure it out. Either do your scant if you need to, do your full quarter if you need to, but it's based on you, not what everybody else says. It's based on what you're doing, the threads you're using, the needle you're using, the machine you're using, and the fabric you're using, not anybody else. Do the test. That'll determine if you do a 1/4 inch or a scant quarter. Okay, now, one of the things that's going to make it so much easier for you is keeping your machine in good working order and clean. It'll do a better seam if it's clean. So we're going to talk a little bit about right here. So this, and you'd be surprised how many people don't know this, but this is your throat plate. This comes off, you guys. No matter what machine you've got, this comes off. Now, you might have a couple of screws on either side that you have to take out. This is a Bernina, so it just pops out. You use that little round circle thing. You just push on that and it pops right out. When you pop that out of there, you get access to this area where your feed dogs are. Your feed dogs are these things right here. If you get a whole bunch of lint and felt and yucky down in here underneath your feed dogs, they're not going to retract properly. And if they don't retract properly, then they're not going to come up enough to grab your fabric to pull it properly. And it's going to impact how well your machine works. Keep it clean. So we use these Tooltron brushes, which looks just like this. And it just really, it's got these real rough bristles. It really gets down in there and gets all the yucky out, and it'll kind of stick inside the bristles. You can see I just pulled a little bit of fuzz out right there. So use a nice Tooltron brush, get all of that gunk out of there so that your machine performs better. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to keep your bobbin case area clean. If you've got a top load bobbin, it's going to be in here already. But if you've got a front load bobbin, it's going to be right in here. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to get in there with this brush and you're going to clean all of the fuzz and the yucky out and make sure that's as clean as you can get it. Look what I just got out of there. That impacts how well your machine works. It also, if you've got thread indicators, it'll set your thread indicators off if you've got fuzz and stuff in there. So keep them clean. This Tooltron brush is a really good brush for that. It's all of $6.99. They're great brushes. Grab one, you'll have it forever. The other thing you can get is from Quilting a Day, Eleanor Burns. She made a stripper out of all of us. These are almost like little Q-tips. They have a bendable neck here and then these bristly things in here. And you can get those in all those little nooks and crannies and crevices, and it'll pull out all that stuff you can't quite get to. Keep your machine clean. What are these? $4.99 for a package, and there are 25 of them, and there's quite a few of them. So you'll use those. Take your machine for a spa day. It does not matter if you've got a $99 machine from Walmart or if you've got a $16,000 machine from some fancy place. Take it in for a spa day once a year. It will perform better if it's fully cleaned out, if the timing is correct on it, and timing is a thing that your tech needs to do, not you. So, if you've had a bunch of needle strikes, your timing may be off, and then it's not gonna do a nice seam for you. Keep your needle replaced. Keep your needle replaced every 8 hours. This is the least expensive thing that you can do to keep your machine running well, is to give it a really good needle. A good needle that's right for the application. A Microtex acutely pointed needle for quilting. That'll give you a great 1/4 inch seam. Test your seams, scant quarter, full quarter, whatever. You do what's right for you. See you next time.